Imagine a world where your words, your very voice, could be locked away in a cage of cold, hard iron. This isn't a dark fantasy. This was a horrifying reality for women in medieval Europe. The instrument of their silence was called the scold's bridle, or the brank. It was a metal mask, a grotesque cage locked over a woman's head. Some versions had a plate, often covered in sharp spikes, that was forced into the mouth, pressing down on the tongue. Any attempt to speak would cause agonizing pain. This wasn't just punishment. It was a tool of public humiliation and control, designed to make an example of any woman deemed too outspoken, too troublesome, or simply too loud. The roots of this cruelty lie deep in a society where a woman's worth was often measured by her silence and obedience. For centuries, the dowry system defined a woman's life. A dowry was the property or money a bride brought to her husband upon marriage. It was less a gift and more a transaction. A large dowry could elevate a family's social standing, while a small one could condemn a woman to a life of scorn. A woman was often seen as property, passed from her father's control to her husband's. Her voice in these matters was non-existent. If she dared to argue, complain, or speak out against her situation, she could be labeled a scold, a nag, or a gossip. These weren't just insults. They were dangerous accusations. The term scold itself was a weapon. In a world dominated by men, a woman who spoke her mind was a threat to the established order. She was seen as disruptive, unnatural. And for this crime of speaking, the punishment was designed to be uniquely cruel and personal. The scold's bridle was not about justice. It was about power. It was a physical manifestation of the phrase, "A woman should be seen and not heard." While men might be fined or briefly imprisoned for public disturbances, the bridle was reserved almost exclusively for women, turning their own bodies into a spectacle of submission. Let's look closer at this device. The brank was typically forged from iron. It consisted of a headpiece, a framework that encircled the skull, and a muzzle that locked over the face. The most barbaric element was the gag, or the brank bit. This metal plate was inserted into the mouth, sometimes smooth, but often roughened or spiked to inflict maximum pain. Imagine the feeling of cold, sharp iron against your tongue, the taste of metal, the inability to swallow, the constant threat of tearing your own flesh if you dared to move your mouth. The weight of it alone would have been a burden, a constant, heavy reminder of your supposed transgression. The experience of wearing it was a multi-layered torment. First, there was the physical pain. The spikes would dig into the tongue, causing bleeding and intense discomfort. The iron cage would chafe the skin, and the sheer weight would cause neck and head pain. Then came the public humiliation. A woman forced to wear the bridle was often paraded through the town streets. Sometimes she was led on a leash by her husband or a town official. Neighbors, friends, and strangers would gather to stare, to mock, to jeer. She was transformed from a person into a public spectacle, an object of ridicule. She couldn't speak to defend herself, couldn't cry out in pain, couldn't even plead for mercy. She was utterly silenced, trapped in her own head with the sounds of the crowd's scorn. A woman, let's call her Elspeth, is dragged from her home. Her crime? Arguing with a merchant she believed had cheated her. The town beadle fastens the cold, heavy brank over her head. The metal bit forces her mouth open, its spikes biting into her tongue. Her children watch from the doorway, their faces a mask of terror and confusion. She is then led through the cobblestone square. People stop their work to point and laugh. Some throw mud or rotten vegetables. The sounds are a cacophony of jeers and whispers. She can hear them all, but she cannot answer. She can only walk, each step a monument to her shame, the iron cage, a symbol of a world that demanded her silence. This wasn't a rare occurrence. This was a recognized form of social control in parts of England, Scotland, and Germany for hundreds of years. The parade was the peak of the punishment, but the consequences lingered long after the bridle was removed. The physical scars might heal, but the psychological wounds would have been deep and lasting. How could you trust your neighbors again after they had cheered at your suffering? How could you look your own family in the eye? Many women were likely broken by the experience, retreating into a forced silence, terrified of ever speaking out again. The bridle's purpose was not just to punish one woman, but to terrorize all women into submission. It was a message broadcast through the town square. This is what happens to women who do not know their place. And yet, we know that women resisted. Their stories are harder to find, buried in court records, or dismissed as hearsay, but they exist. We find whispers of defiance of women who, despite the risks, continued to speak. They ran businesses, challenged injustices, and managed their households with a strong will. They were herbalists, writers, and community leaders. The very existence of the scold's bridle proves that women were not silent. It was created precisely because they spoke. It is a monument not to their silence, but to their attempts to be heard. Its brutality is a measure of the threat they were perceived to be. The last recorded use of the brank was in the mid-19th century. As society evolved, such overt and barbaric forms of punishment thankfully faded into history. But the bridle's legacy is more than just a museum artifact. It serves as a chilling reminder of how far societies will go to control women's voices. The desire to silence women who are seen as too loud, too opinionated, or too difficult hasn't vanished. It has simply changed its form. Today, the iron cage is gone, but it has been replaced by online harassment, public shaming on social media, and the constant, subtle pressure for women to be more agreeable, less assertive. The story of the scold's bridle is not just a dark chapter from our past. It's a powerful lesson for our present. It teaches us about the enduring struggle for women to speak and be heard. It reminds us of the courage it takes to raise your voice against injustice and the importance of ensuring that no one, ever again, is punished for the simple act of speaking their truth. The fight for a voice is a fight for humanity itself. Thank you for watching. If you found this story important, please like this video and subscribe for more dives into our shared history.